Welcome, Travelers, Champions, Heroes, and Villains, to the adventure. Today I want to talk to you all about one of the most polarizing topics I think people can talk about in Dungeons & Dragons today. At least in my experience watching DM fails on YouTube or Reddit, it revolves around when a Dungeon Master inserts an NPC into the game. Not just any NPC, no. This isn't just your standard bartender, shopkeeper, or even Big Bad. No, this is when they add the dreaded NPC that accompanies the party so they know when they are messing up or to show them how to play the game the right way. This is the story of DMNPCs. Now first off, what is a DMNPC? Because in a game of D&D, let's be honest, there are dozens, maybe even hundreds of NPCs, and to be real, almost none of which will ever get the dreaded call-out of being a DMNPC. First of all, I think most of us would agree that a DM NPC has to be a combat class, either from the player's guide or something homebrewed up, just to be that much more aggravating. That still doesn't really narrow it down though. That's literally all the enemies that PCs will encounter during the entire campaign. So what else is needed to make them this despised creation? Well, they have to interact with the party frequently to the point they're either a constant companion of the party or frequently encounter the party that they might as well be part of every session in some way, shape, or form. That narrows the description down a bit more. However, that could also be the bodyguard of the player's hideout or fortress, or even a driver if they hire somebody capable of protecting their horses while the PCs are off in the woods fighting monsters and demons. There is one final characteristic that all doomed DM NPCs have in common. And they're more powerful than the party in almost every way, shape, and form. They have the optimized build or multi-class creation that the DM could come up with that also somehow possess all the knowledge needed to beat anything that the DM could throw at them. This is the DM's self-insert character that they want to travel with the players while they also are writing the story. This can easily lead to something awful, because the DM knows all the tricks, all the traps that they're going to be arriving with to challenge the party. So it becomes very tempting to just have the DM NPC that they created get the jump on all the monsters or find all the traps. Perhaps even all the treasure is tailor-made for the DM NPC. All these interactions create DM favoritism towards, well, themselves. We've all heard about a DM that favors someone, usually a significant other, but one that favors their own self-insert has just created their own Mary Sue, which is a really nice way of saying the DM just ruined their own game. Now, does this mean that a DM should never have any NPC help the party? I think if done right, a DM NPC can be an asset for a party, or a cleverly disguised hindrance to throttle back on a party if you need to tune an encounter to be more difficult. Now, I currently run a campaign for just a single player at the moment, and it would be crazy easy for a random monster or trap to roll really well while my player rolls really bad. So a character going down when there's a party of one would mean instant death. Game over, thanks for coming. You lose. In fact, it already happened, with a crazy crit from a Knoll of all things. It was some crazy 40-ish damage from a single hit, and boom, character down. But that wasn't the end of the campaign there. And no, not because the Knolls somehow took her prisoner and led to a fancy prison escape. No, there was a friendly cleric that tossed a healing word, and boom, campaign continues on, with a slightly more wary attitude towards Knolls. Now, this wasn't just a random passing cleric. It was in fact a member of her party, a member that I, as the DM, control. Now, does this make me some kind of hypocrite? Am I a horrible dungeon master? Am I just blind to obvious double standards? I mean, maybe. But this cleric rarely, if ever, steals the show. He misses quite frequently with his mace, gets stuck in small places, but he comes in pretty clutch with a heal now and then. So, what makes me think I have this whole DM NPC thing figured out properly? How am I playing a member of the party while I also do my best not to steal the show? Well, 3 steps. Step 1. I'm very aware of my ability as the DM to influence anything. So, while there are items I do intend for a cleric to use, everything that's dropped is looted by my player first. She gets to distribute the loot as she sees fit. so things that end up on an NPC party member are entirely up to the player first. Step 2. The NPC characters don't roll on checks, unless they're asked to. Except for passive perception, they aren't entirely stupid. Well, one might be, but that's different. They aren't out there looking for traps or monsters unless they would normally pick it up. If they're asked about knowledge they might have, they'll share it freely, so if my player doesn't have a good history or religion check, but another member does, they'll roll and let her know if they in fact know anything about the topic. They'll never really offer up things randomly unless it relates to them, such as the side quest story or motivation that they have. Step 3. I think of the NPCs kinda like the party that a player would have in a single-player RPG, kinda like Mass Effect. They'll handle things decently unless they're told otherwise by the player. They'll fight when a fight breaks out, they'll use whatever gear they find, and they'll pick up their own spells. If my player tells them to swap out a spell for something different as a situation needs, then they'll do so at their earliest convenience. The exception to this is when they're in town or in a roleplay situation. I'll have the character walk around and take care of their own personal business, restocking components, potions, and the like. Or when roleplaying, their personality will come out more. There are some, in fact, impatient hotheads, calm, collected types, and just silly nutcases. Overall, the way I work my NPCs that hasn't got my players to at least tell me they hate them is that I treat them as the supporting characters. They have a little bit of background stories of their own that my players can get into if they want, but they can just as easily pass it by if they aren't interested. It's not mandatory. They're mostly there to assist in combat as extra meat and spells to make sure that a lucky hit doesn't just cut a campaign dead in one random session. The secret evil thing is that you can also use them as something to dangle in front of the character. This person you've been adventuring with has been captured by the big bad, or they're blinded by a rage they have towards a particular creature, and they'll ignore all their monsters in favor of that one in particular. Which means the player has to think about what the best situation is to save their companions. I guess that's how I judge if I'm doing it right. If there is an awful DMNPC in the party and it gets kidnapped or goes down in a fight, I feel the players will be more than happy and just not attempt to help it up. If instead, a character gets brainwashed by a cult into joining their ceremony, and the players go out of their way to venture into some disgusting sewers to save a broken paladin, then perhaps you might be adding to a player's story with your DM NPC. Not stealing the spotlight, just enhancing it. So, until next time, may all your attacks have advantage, and I'll see you all again in the next adventure.